Mr. Taneve, you explained that Robinhood restricted transactions in certain securities to meet demands coming from your clearinghouse. And yet, on January 28th, you represented to the media that there was no liquidity problem. Isn't it true that being concerned about having enough capital to meet deposit requirements, isn't that a liquidity problem? Could you just answer yes or no?
Chairwoman Waters, I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
Is yes or no?
We always felt comfortable with our liquidity and the additional capital that Robinhood raised.
Please answer yes or no.
We always felt comfortable with
my
our
5
liquidity.
minutes. I don't have time. I just need a yes or no answer.
I stand by my statement. The additional capital we raised wasn't to meet capital requirements or deposit requirements.
Gentlemen,
Excuse me.
I'm reclaiming my time. This liquidity problem had real consequences for your customers, but I wonder if they were all that surprised. Between December 2019 and December 2020, Robinhood customers experienced monetary losses due to system outages. Customer accounts were reportedly compromised. The firm repeatedly failed to testify its best execution obligations, and it misled its customers regarding its revenue sources. It seems retail investors often get a bad deal at Robinhood. Mr. Taneve, also, while you testified today that, quote, Robinhood's customers benefit greatly from payment for order flow, quote unquote, in December 2020, the SEC charged Robinhood for not disclosing that it was getting paid to send customer trades to Citadel Securities and other market makers, and for not seeking the best terms for its customers' orders. Robinhood provided such inferior trade prices it cost your customers over $34 million. Is your testimony after Robinhood paid? Is it your testimony after Robinhood paid the SEC $65 million to settle those charges that this conflict of interest is in your customers' best interest? Yes or no?
Chairwoman Waters, first let me say regulatory compliance is at the center of everything that we do. We've made mistakes in the past. I'm not claiming that I'm perfect.
Yes or no to that question?
So Citadel Securities is an important counterparty. Nobody's denying that. The reason that...
Gentlemen, can I answer yes or no? I'm reclaiming my time. Meanwhile, Mr. Griffin, Citadel's role in this event also raises significant questions for policymakers. Citadel Securities pays Robinhood tens of millions of dollars to process trades by Robinhood's customers. This relationship gives Citadel Enterprise key non-public information as to direction and volume of trades by retail investors. Your firm makes use of private exchanges called dark pools and other off-exchange trading to trade large sizes without moving the market against you. In fact, at some point last month, 50% of all trades occurred in dark pools or via OTC off-exchange trades. Your business strategy is designed intentionally to undermine market transparency and skim profits from companies and other investors. One problem, though, Mr. Griffin, is that we don't really know how central your firm has become to the capital markets. Mr. Griffin, does Citadel handle 47% of the U.S. listed retail volume? Please, yes or no?
So, Chairman Waters, the best.
Yes or no?
So, the best of my knowledge, we handle in excess of roughly 40% of all retail volume.
Thank you very much for reclaiming my time. Mr. Griffin, on January 27, did Citadel execute 7.4 billion shares for retail investors, which would be more trades than the average daily volume of the entire United States equities market in 2019? Yes or no?
Chairman Waters, that was by written and oral testimony.
Holy cow, that was hilarious. Yes or no? Yes or no, goddammit. These motherfuckers cannot tell the truth if their lives depended on it. Literally. You know why? Because they're under oath and their lives depend on it. And they can't tell the truth. It's physically, emotionally, and spiritually impossible for guys like these to tell the truth. They can't tell the truth if their lives depend on it. That's where these cliches come from snakes and worms like these guys, Vlad Tenev and Ken Griffin. They can't. They can't tell the truth. So this was Maxine Waters, who is the chairman of the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services. You know, they just released their report. And as I said, a lot of things will be brought to light and a lot of things will unfold after this report was released. And already a lot of things have been exposed, documents, evidence, and really proof that indeed Robinhood did collude with Citadel Securities, and there were a lot of other parties involved. So that's why I say it's brilliant that they took away the buy button last year. It's brilliant that they've been naked shorting. It's brilliant that they use the dark pool, that they do the PFOF system, that they have total return swaps and every other goddamn thing that they do, because it's now all coming to light. And it's brilliant that AMC's squeeze was stopped last June due to a couple of different factors. Notwithstanding Adam Aron's issuance of shares to Mudrick Capital, and they turned around and released a report, a short and distort report, stating that the shares were massively overvalued, quote unquote. And it's brilliant that all of the AMC board members, including Adam Aron, dumped millions and millions upon millions of dollars worth of stock all last year through the beginning of this year. Because if not, then all of these things would not have been exposed, and we would not see the cast of characters involved in this that we see now. They would have sailed through history, you know, unknown, and their illicit, nefarious activity would have never been exposed. So this is perfect. The squeeze will happen in due time, when it's meant to happen, when everything that needs to be exposed is exposed. So it's brilliant that this is happening the way that it's happening. So again, this was just an excerpt of the interview of Maxine Waters with Vlad Tenev, and they're talking about the liquidity of Robinhood, and he can't give her a straight answer, yes or no. I think that the question was pretty straightforward, and as you can see, he can't give a straight answer. You know why? Because he was coached. You know, besides the fact that he's a freaking liar, he was coached. He has papers. He probably stayed up all night with a team of lawyers that Ken Griffin sent over to him, who he referred to him. This is what you say. This is how you say it. Keep your mouth shut. You better get this right, you stupid asshole, or I'll smack the shit out of you, little kid. That's basically what happened. So that's why he can't give a straight answer. So again, this is addressing the liquidity of Robinhood, but again, there's more interviews. There's one with AOC asking about taking away the buy button, but this is just this particular excerpt. And let's see if indeed there was no liquidity issue with Robinhood the day the buy button was taken away. Well, according to Bloomberg, Meme Stock Probe finds Robinhood woes were worse than it let on. It was actually worse. Robinhood markets faced a more dire situation during the height of last year's meme stock frenzy than executives at the online brokerage let on publicly, according to that report. A more than year-long investigation. As I've been telling you all along this channel, these investigations, the documentation, the evidence gathering, the interviews, getting rats to rat, it takes time. You know this, as I said, so don't get discouraged. There's stuff we don't know about that hasn't been released yet. More to come, folks. A more than year-long investigation by staff on the House Financial Services Committee concluded Friday that the frenzy trading in GameStop and AMC, that's a key, and AMC, it's not just GameStop, posed a significant threat to the online brokerage. Robinhood avoided defaulting on its regulatory collateral obligations in late January 2021, only because it received a waiver from its clearinghouse, according to the findings. So they received a waiver from its clearinghouse, and I'm going to show you that. And here's one such clearinghouse, Apex. Apex grew concerned that they may be required to meet their full collateral deposit requirement, both the $434.9 million value at-risk charge from their portal and the additional excess capital premium charge of $562 million Apex had calculated internally at any moment. And they would have a maximum of 1 hour to meet the margin call once issued at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and 10:30. Apex reviewed additional slices that continue to show a total potential deposit requirement of more than $1 billion. At 10:45, Apex reviewed a slice indicating a potential requirement of approximately $1.06 billion, largely consisting of a value at risk charge of approximately $325 million, and what Apex calculated to be an excess capital premium charge that had increased to approximately $607.9 million. So to the dollar and to the minute, they have documentation and evidence of this in the report. Upon receiving the 10 a.m. slice, Apex personnel felt that it would be challenging for them to meet a discretionary intraday margin call in the vicinity of $1 billion within the normal 1-hour time frame. Upon receiving what appeared to be an anomalous slice data, it quickly reached out to NSCC and confirmed that the number provided in Apex's portal were accurate, which did not include the excess capital premium charge calculated internally by Apex. Senior Apex personnel, expecting trading activity to increase throughout the day and drive the requirements even higher, decided to impose the trading restrictions on AMC, GME, and costs. Okay, approximately 90% of Apex's total potential NSCC deposit requirement. Apex's CEO Bill Capuzzi approved of the decision to impose trading restrictions prior to the distribution of the emergency notice via email that was sent to Apex's clients. So you see their role in this whole situation. Let's look at this. David Dussault, COO of Robinhood, who again, they said they did not collude or communicate with any of these other people. We will navigate through this NSCC issue. We are too big for them to actually shut us down. Okay, so as I said, the truth is being brought to light. It must frustrate the conspiracy theorists to no end that Vlad and I have never texted, called, or met each other. But I must say, kudos to Vlad and his team at Robinhood for their remarkable success story. It's not so remarkable now, are they, that they're down to $7-8 a share, Kenny? Not so successful now. Robinhood and Citadel Securities engaged in quote-unquote blunt negotiations the night before the trading restrictions to lower the PFOF rates Robinhood was charging Citadel Securities. You saw this in yesterday's video, right? And you saw this all over Twitter, showing that there was direct communication the day before or the night before the trading restrictions were in place. And you have a lot of shills, haters, and trolls saying, this is not talking about the buy button being taken away. This is about the PFOF rates. But you know what? It doesn't matter because there's going to be other quotes and other documentation. I just showed you the COO's communication emails discussing this exact thing. So regardless of the fact that they're talking about lowering the PFOF in this particular correspondence, the fact of the matter is they said they did not discuss anything the day before, and this is proof that they did and that they were continuing communication throughout this whole process, which we already know. And the rest of the documentation and evidence and information is going to come out. We already know that. So all you trolls and haters and shills out there who want to say this doesn't prove anything, you're full of shit, and shut the fuck up. You're an idiot. And now here we have Virtu, the other market maker, next to Citadel, the biggest market maker next to Citadel. Through January 27th and 28th, several of the market makers Robinhood routinely routed orders to struggle with operational constraints. Routing trading information generates vast quantities of data, blah, 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 blah. Robinhood market makers had been struggling to accommodate the acute market volatility prior to January 28th. Virtu sent an email to all its broker-dealer clients asking Robinhood and others to route away all equities that began with the letter A, except for Apple, AMD, and Amazon. So I will say this. Virtu was definitely involved, as you can see. Don't send us any of your AMC, GME orders. We can't handle it. We won't handle it. Usually they do payment for order flow, meaning they pay Robinhood, they pay E-Trade, they pay Webull, they pay these brokerages for their orders. But right now they're turning away their business because they couldn't handle the volume of it. But look at the way that they route it. So this I will give to Virtu. At least they're smart about it. They're covering their ass. They didn't say route away all AMC orders. They just said all equities that begin with the letter A, except for Apple, AMD, and Amazon, which had nothing to do with the squeeze and which didn't have unusual volume. So that's a sneaky thing that they did, but smart, not as stupid as these other motherfuckers who got caught out there. Look at this guy. He thought these emails would never surface. And keep this in mind, NSCC, we're going to touch on this. So you see all of the players that are involved. It's pretty much everybody. So initially, we thought when Robinhood took away the buy button, it was just Robinhood took away the buy button. Robinhood took away the buy. Turns out Robinhood was the little nickel bag dealer on the corner. But getting to him, we were able to get to the guy who supplies him. And once we got to the guy who supplies him, we got to the guy who supplies the guy who supplies him. And we're working our way up the ladder, as you can see. So here we go. Timothy Cudahy killed the GME squeeze. Who is Timothy Cudahy? He allowed for the buy button to be deleted instead of collecting the $21.9 billion from the violators. When they win, they gladly take our money. But when we win, they stop the game and they change the rules in the middle of the game. It's like a basketball game. And when they're blowing you out, they'll just play the game and they'll score and they'll spit on you and laugh and their crowd is cheering. They have the home court. They own the refs. And then all of a sudden, once you start coming back and then now you start blowing them out, you turn the tides. What do? They put a lid on your basket. They start to foul you and tackle you, and no fouls are called. They don't foul out no matter how many fouls that they have, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So this is exactly what they're doing, just with a suit and tie on and under the guise of it being something different other than a game. But this is literally a game. And this is what they're doing. They're putting a lid on your basket, and they control the refs and the scorekeeper. Every time you score, they're putting points on their board. So on the morning of January 28th, Timothy Cudahy, Managing Director of Financial Risk Management for the DTCC, determined that waiving the penalty charges would promote market stability by mitigating the risk that impacted firms could default due to the application of non-core charge that was, in this case, caused by extraordinary market volatility. Cudahy has the ultimate authority to authorize waivers of the excess capital premium charges, and in theory, he does not need to consult with anyone to authorize a waiver, in theory. So he basically waived 8 NSC member firms in total were assessed excess capital premium charges aggregating approximately $22 billion, and 5 of these firms were subject to enhanced surveillance by the NACC, but he waived these requirements at whim. So as I said, it's a game. So who is Timothy Cudahy? I told you who he was. Who does he work for? The DTCC, Managing Director of Financial Risk Management. So we're going to look into the DTCC.
When I first heard the term naked short selling, I had no clue as to what they were mentioning.
The evidence was astonishing.
Everybody denied that it was brokers in the big brokerage houses that were doing it, but we were able to identify very clearly that that's exactly who was doing it, driving down the value of those stocks, driving the company out of business. A lot of that was going on without these CEOs knowing it.
Harmer and Bennett continued their crusade to clean up Wall Street.
Now, Senator Bennett, he was willing to go forward. He was committed. And in fact, we had this piece of legislation drafted.
But just when it looked like Congress would finally take the lead against fraud on Wall Street, Harmer and Bennett ran into a stone wall, one erected by the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation.
They have such enormous power. They are able to be totally off the record, totally invisible, but wield enormous impact upon what's going on.
As the fails to deliver problem continued to escalate, advocates and economists began to take a closer look at the DTCC. Especially a process they use to clear the trades called the Stock Borrow Program.
The broker looks for shares, can't find them, says to the seller, can't find the shares. He says, proceed.
The shares went from Flip Firm to Knight Securities, where they changed gender from short to long, and they were sold to the public and ended up in people's IRAs and 401ks as long shares.
But they were phantom shares.
They didn't really exist. The value of those shares went from $7 or $8 to near zero, and those people lost their retirement funds. I've got 50,000 pieces of paper in the garage that show all of the New York banking firms laundering money from the Bahamas through all the New York banks.
They use different processes to move it offshore, to launder it.
If you have money, you can't just put it in a sock and bury it in the backyard.
So as you can see from that video, the gentleman, quote unquote, he said they have such enormous power. So again, when this thing started, we were very ignorant, you know, and we thought it was Robinhood, and then it was E-Trade 2 and TD Ameritrade, and it was Webull, and we were thinking about brokerages, but it just turns out, like I said, they were just the corner dealers. They were the small players. They were the pawns who did things at the behest of their higher-ups, of the Virtus of the world, of the Citadels of the world, right, of the Apex Clearing of the world. They just did what they were told. And it turns out this whole time, or at least half the time, then we thought Ken Griffin was the boss. We thought he was the enemy. You know, the Ken Griffins of the world, the Steve Cohens of the world. Even before that, we thought Melvin Capital, Gabe Plotkin, who was heavily short GME and AMC. We thought he was the big fish, right? Because he drove nice cars and lived in the penthouse. And then we took him out. And it turns out he was just a small fry. You know, he had Ken Griffin and Steve Cohen. He was the protege of Steve Cohen. So it just goes on and on and on and on up the ladder. So pardon that reference, but it's just the perfect way to describe what this is, because it's the same type of crime. And it's no coincidence that the feds are using RICO to investigate and build a case against these guys, because that's exactly what it is. This is gangster shit. They're just doing it with suits and ties, and they don't wear gold chains and drive in cars with big rims, right? But it's the same thing. It's actually much worse, the criminality that they're involved in and that they do, because it steals from so many more people. It hurts so many more people, and it expands across such a wide spectrum for such a long period of time. So towards the end of that clip, you saw the gentleman talking about how they hide their ill-gotten gains through the Bahamas, offshore accounts. So if you've been following the channel, you already know that's the same thing that the Citadels of the world and everybody, you know, all of them do it. That's what they do. They hide it in overseas accounts, in these tax havens, like the Bahamas and all of these islands. So in this video, they leaked Citadel's offshore accounts. So I'm going to link this in the upper right corner if you want to take a look at what this thing looks like. And again, if you've been following the channel, about a month ago, we talked about the DTCC, and more importantly in this video, the scam of the century. The DTC does not insure you. This was 2 months ago, so I'm going to link both of these videos as well in the upper right corner if you want to learn a little bit more about the DTCC. But we're going to touch on it in this video as well. So let's look at them. Cede and Company. Who's Cede and Company? You're talking about the DTCC. Who's Cede and Company? Well, if you know the DTCC, you have to know who Cede and Company is, because they're the actual owners, or they are the DTCC, just the other name for them. So you know how like they like to hide things and have things under different umbrellas and to hide their tax implications and all these other things. It's similar to when you open up an LLC, you want to protect your personal assets, so you have your business under your LLC. So if somebody does sue your business, then they're not able to take your personal assets. You know, they have these types of things down to a science. I mean, they designed it, for Christ's sake, right? So Cede and Company, shorthand for Certificate Depository, shorthand for Cede, as defined, meaning to relinquish, give up, hand over. That is so apropos, okay? Because when you buy a stock, you think you're the owner of the stock, but you are not the owner of the stock. You are the beneficiary. The actual owner of the stock is the DTCC, so it's no coincidence what it's saying here and what the meaning of Cede is. You've heard the word Cede before, and this is exactly what it means: to relinquish, give up, hand over. How appropriate is that? Is a specialist U.S. financial institution that processes transfers of stock certificates on behalf of DTC, the Central Securities Depository used by the U.S. national market system, which includes the NYSE, NASDAQ, and other exchanges, together with associated clearinghouses such as NSCC, FICC, DTCC, and others. And I told you about Apex earlier. So these are such clearinghouses. So Cede technically owns substantially all of the publicly issued stock in the United States. Thus, investors do not themselves hold direct property rights in stock, but rather have contractual rights that are part of a chain of contractual rights involving Cede. So it's not even the contractual rights. They're part of a chain of contractual rights. So technically, you don't own shit. You just think you do. And we're going to touch more on that a little bit later. So a common misconception is that Cede and Company is merely a fictitious legal name used to refer to DTC, which is the DTCC. In fact, Cede is actually an NYC-based partnership of certain employees of DTC. Cede is a separate legal person from DTC, which is owned by DTC participants who are banks and brokerage houses and not employees of DTC. One reason Cede is structured as a partnership is that each general partner can order transfers of stock registered in the name of the partnership without the need for presenting a separate corporate resolution to the stock issues transfer agent or stock registrar to validate the authority of the transfer. So in other words, they have full power and full autonomy. When the shit hits the fan, they can do whatever they want. And let's take one more look at this. This is C Bonds. I'm going to link all these sites as I normally do. Here is Cede and Company. Cede and Company is a specialist U.S. financial institution, processes transfers of stock certificates on behalf of DTC. You saw this earlier. Cede and Company is a partnership used by the DTC as its nominee to hold securities for its participants, all of which are brokerage firms, banks, and other financial institutions. And here are all the affiliates. So this is the rabbit's hole. I mean, we could look into all of these and see what they are. I'm just going to click this to kind of show you. And you can do that on your own time if you'd like. But it gives you some information on some of its affiliates. Just randomly clicking on some of these, you might be able to find more information, like what the hell is going on, who owns these companies, who are really the people in power. Janus Henderson, a British global asset management group headquartered in the city of London. So all of these quote-unquote elites, they never put stuff in their name. It's all about privacy, and you can never link anything to them. So that's basically what's going on here. It's just a tangled web. What's actually going on here? Who actually owns what? What is the DTCC? What's Cede and Company? What the hell is going on? I thought I owned my stocks. I thought the stock exchange was the holder or owner, or I thought that was the umbrella. I thought, no, you're wrong. You thought wrong. The Rothschilds, controlling the world's money supply for more than 2 centuries. The Rothschilds have been in control of the world's money supply for more than 2 centuries, yet most Americans have never heard of them. The family's business empire encompasses a diverse range of business interests, including investment banking, asset management, mergers and acquisition, mining, energy, mixed farming, wineries, and charities. The Rothschilds are a family of Jewish financiers. The family's emergence in the world of high finance started with Mayor Amschel Rothschild, founder of and a moneylender at Frankfurt, financial advisor to the Landgraves of Hesse-Kassel, agent of the British government in subsidizing European sovereigns in war against Napoleon. Mayor Amschel Rothschild's 5 sons were Amschel, who succeeded his father as the head of Frankfurt establishment. Rothschild's family was the dominant power in European investment banking and brokerage in the 19th century. Family members held seats in Parliament and in the House of Lords. They became barons in London, and they founded the Rothschild Natural History Museum. By 1815, Nathan controlled the Bank of England and boldly declared, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." This became the Rothschild family's mantra: control the world by controlling the world's money supply. By the end of the 19th century, the Rothschild family controlled half of the world's wealth. Things starting to make sense now? In 1791, the family gained control of America's money supply through Alexander Hamilton, the family's agent in George Washington's cabinet. When the family established a central bank in the U.S., named the First Bank of the U.S., which received a 20-year charter from Congress in 1791. When Congress refused to renew the charter in 1812, the Rothschilds threatened the U.S. with a, quote, most disastrous war, end quote, with Britain. The U.S. stood firm. Following through under threat, a second war broke out between the U.S. and Britain. The British war effort was financed by the Rothschilds. When the war ended in 1815, U.S. finances were in shambles. By 1816, Congress passed a bill authorizing a second Rothschild-dominated central bank with a 20-year charter named the Second Bank of America. This bank gave the Rothschilds control of the American money supply again. In 1823, the Rothschilds took control over the financial operations of the Catholic Church worldwide. In 1832, President Andrew Jackson led a successful effort by Congress to retake control of America's money supply from the Rothschilds by refusing to renew the charter for the Second Bank of America. Not until 1913 would the Rothschilds be able to set up their third central bank in America. In the meantime, beginning in 1875, acting through their New York banking partner Jacob Schiff at the banking house of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, financed John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, Edward Harriman's railroad empire, and Andrew Carnegie's steel empire using Rothschild's money. They also helped New York financier J.P. Morgan and the Drexels and Biddles of Philadelphia establish European branches of their respective banks in exchange for allowing them to control the banking industry in New York and therefore America. In 1913, they established their last and current central bank in America, the Federal Reserve Bank. This independent bank regulates and controls America's money supply and monetary policies. This is the juicy part. Even though the Federal Reserve is overseen by a board of governors appointed by the President of the United States, the bank's real control still resides with the Rothschilds family. Not even Trump can break the Rothschilds family's financial grip and influence on the Federal Reserve Bank. The family's banking business pioneered international high finance during the industrialization of Europe and America. The banks financed railway systems around the world. They also financed the construction of the Suez Canal. In 1987, they created the World Conservation Bank to gain control of land in third world countries, which represents 30% of the land surface of the earth. The bank assumes the debt of these countries in exchange for real estate that is conveyed to the bank. In 1995, they controlled an estimated 80% of the world's uranium reserves, thereby giving the family a monopoly over nuclear power. By 2001, only 7 nations in the world, China, Iran, Afghanistan, North Korea, Sudan, Cuba, and Libya, did not have a Rothschild-controlled central banks. Is it any wonder why these are the enemies, the mortal enemies, and the evildoers, and basically the devils according to the United States? These are the only countries they can't control. Coincidence? The Rothschilds' domination of the world's financial markets continues to this day. And I will link this article, but I felt it was that important. And I'm not going to go into every point into this, but you get the idea. So the question is, was the United States, or the advent or the creation of the United States, was it people fleeing Europe to gain religious and other freedoms, or was it just an offshoot of the Rothschilds family and Rothschilds business? In 1791, the family gained control of America's money supply through Alexander Hamilton, the family's agent in George Washington's cabinet. So these are the types of people who own the DTCC, who owns the financial markets, the Federal Reserve. So I would say that entitlement is the key word here. They came, they established, they passed down their instructions, because nobody lives forever, to their descendants and to the future generations, their family, right? And so they'll be damned if some outsiders, visitors, lowlives come and reap the fruits of their labor, of their establishment. In their minds, you know, hypothetically, even if they gave all of the money that they had in the world to us idiots, we would just fuck, drink, eat, and piss it away, right? We just take up space. We're no different from cattle, right? We lack the intelligence, class, and sophistication and pedigree that they have in their minds. It's their world, it's their plans, it's their establishment, it's their way, it's their roads. The lines in the road have to be 6 inches wide and 6 inches long, and you have to be green light, red light, yellow light, stop signs are red, and every single goddamn thing you can conceive of, they have to conceive of it, because it's their world. This is how you dress, this is how you talk, this is the education that you have, this is what you are, this is where you're from, this is the lines that separate the countries, this is blah, 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 this is what you watch. This is the music you listen to. This is the God you worship. They play God. They think they're God. They desperately want to be God, because on this earth they are God. Their full reward is on this earth in this lifetime. The 90 years, if at best, that they experience on this earth, that's their reward in full. Whereas others, more spiritually inclined people, believe that the spirit lives on and this life is just a portion of life in its entirety. Many believe there's an eternity waiting for them. So if that theory and that notion is true, then what is 90 years, at best, as I said, compared to eternity? It's not even a drop in the bucket. And you could also answer the question, if there's a God, then how come children and little babies sometimes pass away? How fair is that? What type of God would allow that? Well, I can answer that too. 1 year and 90 years, when you compare it to eternity, are both a drop in the bucket. So the 90 years that you deem to be significant in the grand scheme of things, I can argue, is not significant, again, when you compare it to eternity. So that's the answer to that. So again, these people, this lifetime is all they have. That's why everything has to be ideal. Everything has to be set up. That's why they go crazy if one little thing, one speck of dust on their leather chair, you know, one grain of salt missing from their meal, one word that they don't like coming out of their servant's mouth. You get it? Because it's all about this life. That's all they have. So please don't ask and please don't complain. The financial markets are so crooked. How come this law is so unfair? And how come this? And how come that? And how come this? You know the answer. They set it up. It's their system. So do you think they set it up so you can get you can get the upper hand and then you can move up and then you become the power? Again, in their minds, even if you had all the power, you would just piss it away. You're not capable. You don't have the intellect. And again, you didn't set this up. We did. This is our thing. This is our world. So you name it, they set it up. The school system, the financial system, the logistical system, the roads, the sewage system, every single thing you can conceive of, they set it up. It's their world. So they'll never let you have a fair shake. So what's the point of complaining? So that's why this battle is so important, and that's why this battle will only be forced. It's not going to come through somebody being fair and somebody leveling the playing field and a neutral referee coming into the game and then a technician coming in and taking the lid off of your basket and them being limited to 6 fouls for the entire game. It's not going to happen. This has to be forced through extenuating circumstances such as the Russian war, such as the Chinese economic situations such as pandemics and other possible diseases and instability and all of these types of things which force margin calls. And as you can see from last year's events, even then they just changed the rules, took away the buy button, stop trading, and then lied about it. So that's why this report is so important. It could change the tide and actually make it so that the rules are enforceable. I mean, Bernie Madoff got away with what he did for how many years, how many decades, but eventually he had to pay the piper, right? So don't lose hope. We don't know how this thing's going to be sparked, but we do see things happening. If they had full power, then Melvin Capital would have never went under. So that's also showing you that it's possible. Melvin Capital was huge, let's face it. They're the poster child of what's possible. So even though they're not showing that they're in pain and hiding that they're bleeding, it doesn't mean that they're not bleeding. They're going to try to hide it all the way. So they're sitting on top of their hill, drinking cold lemonade, and reaping the rewards of the labor that all of the ants that they send out is doing. So it's virtual and hidden slavery, and it's enforced through invisible chains and threats enforced by weapons and penalties. If you don't adhere, you're going to jail. Pay your taxes or you're going to jail. You can do a whole video on taxes. A lot of people say taxes are illegal. Taxes weren't always a law. What difference is it now than, let's say, ancient Egypt, where you had to lug 2-ton limestone blocks in 100-degree heat for free so you can build pyramids for your king? So after he's dead, he could be in a nice building. And they're going to bury his servants alive with him. And this is after your grandparents did this, and your grandchildren after you are going to do the same thing you did for your entire lifetime. So do you actually think it's any different now? Or is it all an illusion? So the wealth and power, the value of the dollar, with all of the debt this country has incurred, is not paid by yours and my taxes that we paid last year, this year, 3 years ago. The budget of this country is being financed, or the value of the dollar, the credit of the dollar, which gives the country its power, the world's currency, is financed by the taxes of yours and my great, 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 great grandkids. That's how far in debt that they are. So it's the labor of our future generations that's affording these people the power that they wield. That's what's paying for all of these things. And again, that's how much debt they're in. So the taxes that you and I paid this year, it didn't even make a dent in the interest payments that it owes. So that would make us virtual slaves for infinity, wouldn't it? So we started off by seeing the dealer on the corner sell a nickel bag, and then we wanted him out of our neighborhood, and we were focused on him. And then eventually we saw that there was somebody supplying him with an ounce, and then we knew we had to get him out. That was Gabe Plotkin. And then we realized there was somebody who gave Gabe Plotkin a pound, and that was Ken Griffin, and we thought he was the boss, and that if we take Ken Griffin out, game over. You know what? There's somebody growing that shit in freaking acres and acres of fields, and that's who we're dealing with. That's who needs to be taken out for the drugs to be eradicated. So this is good news, because once you isolate your enemy, the war really starts. Now we actually know who is pulling all the strings, and we don't have to waste energy bitching and moaning and wasting our breath for something that's futile. We know what's going to cause this. It's going to be forced through the situations, through the extenuating circumstances, through the instability. And bottom line, it looks like it's going to have to crash the system. It actually is going to have to crash the market and crash the system unless people step up in Congress and provide fail-safe measures, and maybe there'll be some sort of compromise, right? A buyout type of situation. Who knows how this is going to play out? This is the greatest war in history, as far as I'm concerned. And this should answer all of your questions on why things are so unfair and how could they be allowed to get away with this and how can they do this and how can they do that. This video answers all of those questions. This is how.